Representative Jordan Harris, Majority Chair of the House Appropriations Committee, what remains to be worked out before the state budget goes to the governor's desk?
Well, listen, we are having conversations intensely to build consensus around a number of things, from skill games to education to Medicaid, and all of the other parts of the governor's spend plan, and how we're going to invest these resources at the state level into the Commonwealth to help the Commonwealth continue to grow and provide the essential services that folks are in need of.
So let's talk about public transportation, Representative. That's been in the news quite a bit lately, and there's a House bill with extra funding for public transit that passed your chamber. And tell us briefly, what is in that proposal?
So that proposal not only looks at mass transit funding, which is extremely important to this Commonwealth, but it also looks at other funding, roads, bridges, and things of that nature. Listen, the bottom line is this. Mass transit funding is not just a one part of the state issue. It is about the whole state, and it is about the connectivity of the state. Listen, a lot of people want to talk about SEPTA, but we also got to talk about PRT out in the West. But, you know, people that get on SEPTA, people that get on PRT, people that get on Lanta and the Lehigh Valley, those folks are going to work. Those kids are going to school. Seniors are going to the doctors. And they're all a part of Pennsylvania's economy. We have to fund mass transit because it's good for the Commonwealth, but also it's good for the Commonwealth's economy.
Now, this funding for mass transit is part of the bill that also has funding in it for roads and bridges in it, as you pointed out. And I understand sales tax revenue comes into play in how this money will be gotten. Tell us about that.
Well, look, I tell people all the time, mass transit funding, roads and bridges funding is all about us being a Commonwealth. Look, I'm from Philadelphia, and there are roads and bridges in Cambria County or Pike County or Cameron County that I will never travel on, and that the people who live in 186th district will never travel on. But as a member who represents that area, I will put up a vote to support the resources that go to those counties, understanding the connectivity that we have as a Commonwealth. And so my colleagues in other parts of the state have to put up those votes as well, understanding that even if you've never been on Pittsburgh or a PRT on Pittsburgh or SEPTA in the Southeast, those dollars that are generated are going to roads and bridges and other places across this Commonwealth. That makes the economy of this Commonwealth work, brings businesses into the Commonwealth, and makes people want to do business here.
Representative, why does the House believe that more revenue from sales tax is the answer?
Well, I mean, look, we're at a place now where we have to pay for these things, and we have to do it in a way that we believe doesn't necessarily take, more money out of people's pockets as property tax or things of that nature. This is about spurring the economy, and so the resource that we're using to spur the economy will be undergirded by the actual economy. And that's how this works. And so that's why we're looking at using this as a way to make the investments necessary, understanding that these dollars will continue to cycle into the Commonwealth.
Now, this particular bill that benefits mass transit here in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they have large transit systems, and around the state. Now, again, as you pointed out, that the same bill has a provision for funding road and bridge work. How important was including that in this bill in order to make the whole idea of funding more for mass transit more palatable?
Well, here's the thing. Roads and bridges are a part of transit. It may not be a part of the mass part of it because it's not It's not a transit agency or transit authority. But listen, look, I've traveled this Commonwealth. I've traveled some of the most rural parts of Pennsylvania. And there are parts of Pennsylvania where there aren't the roads necessary to get there. And that means that my friends in Lancaster County who are selling their wares can't get out to parts of Pennsylvania to sell what they have, or folks who are in Northeast Pennsylvania can't get down to other parts of PA and sell what they have. Listen, the the Commonwealth benefits from not only SEPTA or PRT, but it also benefits from all of the roads and bridges
Hmm.
that people are going to travel across to do commerce. And so that kind of investment, we felt was important to show that this legislation that we're talking about with regards to transportation, it's not just about certain sections of the Commonwealth, but it really is about the entire Commonwealth.
Considering you're a Philadelphian yourself, you're up close to the SEPTA transit system there. So let's say this extra funding from the state does not come through. What is SEPTA going to do?
Well, SEPTA has already talked about their plans and what it looks like to cut services. And quite honestly, it's a plan that we cannot see happen in the southeastern part of the state. Let me remind folks who don't know, southeastern part of the state represents about 40% of the revenue that we see in Pennsylvania. I'll say that again. Southeastern part of the state represents about 40% of the revenue for the entire state of Pennsylvania. So we cannot afford, we, not Southeast, we, the state of Pennsylvania, cannot afford to see SEPTA not funded. But in addition to that, we can't afford that with, 2026 coming. 2026, 250th of our country, Philadelphia being the birthplace of the country. You have the FIFA World Cup coming, which is going to be an economic boom, not just for Philadelphia, but for the whole state. You have the draft coming to Pittsburgh. You have conferences coming to this Commonwealth. You're going to have hundreds of thousands of people who've not been to Pennsylvania visit Pennsylvania from all over the world. We need mass transit working and working efficiently so that we can showcase our state and lure more people to want to come live, work, and play here, and for businesses to come here and do business in Pennsylvania. So it's extremely important.
Let's change the subject, Representative, to skill games. And you did acknowledge them when we started our interview a few minutes ago. Just how big a priority is it for you to implement a tax on so-called skill games?
Well, skill games are legal here in Pennsylvania because of a court ruling. And what we see now is that it is an unregulated and untaxed market. And so what we want to do is regulate the market and tax it. The skill games industry is doing very well in Pennsylvania. And what we need is for Pennsylvanians to see the benefit of the industry being here. And that happens by us taxing the industry, but also cities and municipalities need tools to regulate what they see in their communities and their neighborhoods. And so what we're trying to do, and we're working with our partners in the Senate for them to send us a skill games bill that regulates and taxes this industry in Pennsylvania and helps us drive revenue to pay for the things that are in this budget that we need. And it's extremely important that we get skill games over the finish line, understanding that this unregulated, untaxed market is here, this industry is here, and Pennsylvanians need to benefit by seeing it as a part of our general fund.
How big of a tax rate does your caucus support for skill games? We've heard the governor wants 54%. We've heard some tax rates as low as 16%. What number do you favor, and how important is that to getting this legislation done, since that is your goal?
Yeah, well, I won't get into a specific number. I mean, I have a number that we like over other numbers. I think more than anything, what we have to do is we have to regulate this industry in Pennsylvania. We need to get this done, and we need to get it done now. I mean, I've met with leaders from different cities from across the Commonwealth, and they talked about the necessity for having the tools to regulate the industry. And so, we want to get skill games legislation to the governor's desk as a part of this budget package.
Given the uncertainty at the federal level, how much does it concern you how much Pennsylvania is receiving for the Medicaid program?
Yeah, so 3 million Pennsylvanians are actually on Medicaid, and that is 1.2 million who are children. That's about 500,000 who are seniors. It represents 1 in 4 Pennsylvanians on Medicaid. Think about it this way: 1 in 3 births that happen in Pennsylvania happen on Medicaid. And so any cuts at the federal level to Medicaid would have a tremendous impact on Pennsylvania. And folks need to understand this. When we're talking about Medicaid, we're talking about health insurance, health care. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about behavioral health services. We're talking about children being able to go to a primary care physician. We're talking about seniors being able to go to their primary care physician. I want folks to remember back before the Affordable Care Act, when folks were using the emergency room as their primary care physician, and where people were going and spending 13, 14, 15 hours in an ER waiting room. That's what a cut to Medicaid would look like. It also would be disastrous, particularly for our health systems that are in rural Pennsylvania, because what it would mean is that they would be required by law to still provide services, but they wouldn't be reimbursed for the services that they're providing. And so many of those health systems would not be able to afford to continue to provide those services. And many of them would see their doors shut, which would make healthcare access impossible in many parts of Pennsylvania.
Senator Scott Martin said he's open to passing a partial budget. How receptive are you to that idea? Of course, considering the budget is due at the end of June.
Yeah, look, I think we've been very clear in that, we believe that a full year's budget is necessary. There are too many uncertainties at the federal level for us to provide uncertainty at the state level. School districts need to know how much money they'll be getting from the Commonwealth in full. Counties need to know how much money they'll be getting from the Commonwealth in full. And so we have the power, the authority, and we have the time to get a full year's budget done. It's my view and my caucus's view that we should do just that.
How would you compare progress on budget negotiations this year to last year's?
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody always asks that question. Look, every year is a different year with a different set of circumstances and sometimes with different personalities. I think the good thing about this year is that many of the folks around the table have been around the table before to negotiate a budget, which is not something that we could have said, for a few years ago. Because of that, folks have relationships. Staffers have been working together for a year or two now on these type of things. So, look, we're in the thick of it when it comes to budget negotiations. But to say that we're not talking would be untrue. We are having deep conversations on what this budget is going to look like. And I think that while there are a lot of moving parts, I think we have what is necessary to make something happen. Very optimistic.
Representative Jordan Harris, Majority Chair of the House Appropriations Committee, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.